up, everybody? Welcome to Lunch Break with me and Pastor Tom.
Just Tom
Tom,
touched on. Yeah,
Tom.
it's kind of a different
It's
relationship
a-
for us.
Because we're going to get to know each other on a
Yeah.
different level, and the guests we plan on bringing in, we plan on getting to know on a different level, right?
Yes, whole different style that we're used to. And I was kind of thrown off there because you had a little technical difficulty before we came on.
I
You were
did.
too tall, and you
I
said
did.
something funny.
So I had to swivel. I had to swivel my chair. We have our friends in the back who help us out.
We
and
have
Tom's
our
gonna get into
we have
that.
our producer Seth Parker. We have Vince Sierra, our creative director, Tessa Toshstone, our operations consultant, and Cohen Miller, our technical engineer. And they're telling us what to do.
It
so
takes a village. It's not just we
Yes.
can't just do this ourselves. We don't have the capabilities, but with the team, we plan on producing something pretty awesome for you guys. But just
Kinda fun.
to let you guys know, this is how it started. Like,
Yes.
I want you guys to see how these things happen. I'm sitting up here. We have about a minute and a half before we're going live, and I'm told
and that's our first
you
show.
look too tall. 35 seconds. And I'm like, well,
I'm a
trying to
tall
fix it.
guy.
They're like, swivel your chair. So right before we went live, you guys, I'm swiveling the chair, trying to become a shorter human being.
When they said 30 seconds, I go, how is he going to do this?
That's just so hunched over. There you go. But
I love it. There again, as we're here, what we're doing, and Josh Vietti and Vince Sierra did a great job for 6 months,
yes,
bringing to you lunch break. J2 and I, our Justin and I got together a few months ago and
Yeah.
said, hey, we'd like to do a podcast. And Vince and Josh said, take over lunch break. And I'm like, right on. It's a
Yes.
hard act to follow.
and I love where it's at. I love the time slot because this is what I do when I'm driving back and forth from our campuses. I'm listening to a podcast. I'm listening to other people's stories, their lives.
Everybody
And,
has one.
exactly.
Justin. Everybody's got a story. And today, what we're attempting to do is kind of shake the skeletons out of the closet.
Yep.
I
Our
mean-
first guest,
Yeah, ourselves.
ourselves.
And
So
I got my glasses on. That's probably
what we're gonna put everyone else through and asking them some questions that
Yeah.
maybe they haven't opened up to a big audience before. We're gonna ask them and see
Yeah.
where it goes.
Well, and as J2 and I were talking about what kind of conversation do we want to bring to our audience, and our first series of guests are going to be men.
Yes.
Justin and I, we're guys.
Mm-hmm.
I think Justin and I have a shared kind of a beginning.
Yeah.
Is that both of us kind of grew up in what we'd call the world system, right?
Very much so.
Yeah.
And,
We had no more. I had no moral compass. I didn't have any.
whatsoever.
I had zero
Parents tried.
spiritual intelligence.
Yeah.
I did. I mean, I was educated in public school, and my, I had a father that was at home every night, but not when I was awake, because he was a truck driver.
Wow.
And so my brother and I were kind of left with my mom, and so we're two young guys, kind of had to run to the place, and my dad would come home after we went to bed and leave before we got up. So that was just kind of our
And
routine.
for me, it was the divorced home. I was way more together before my parents' divorce happened. Like, divorce does take a toll on families because the divorce happens and I'm with my mom full time, and every 2 weeks I would spend a weekend with my dad, who's a great dude. It's the way it got set up.
Did you work them?
And I worked, and it wasn't their fault. I worked them, so I would be breaking every rule at my mom's house, getting home late, and just sneaking back in the house, sneaking out, just dealing with my own stuff. And I would tell my dad, "Yeah, I'm good. I'm doing fine, following rules, doing good with my grades." Until the report card came, and I hadn't been doing anything, and I was just running wild, just in a weird season of life. And that's where my lack of morality came. And I was able to fake it with my parents, with people around me, that I was a good person, but I was very far from it.
My dad did the best he could. There again, he wasn't home during the day, so my mom, she was a little thing. She wasn't 5 foot tall and maybe 95 pounds. And my brother and I were just, when I was in sixth grade, I was bigger than my mom. So my dad, if we were misbehaving, he had to wake us up and get out of bed to discipline us, or wait till the weekend. And we actually got a chance to, be better before he actually had a chance to get onto us. So, what we're kind of saying is, as a lot of us guys, are raised in the world, I'm not sure we all have somebody there to be part of our lives.
Yeah.
And-
Yeah, and there's influences that either are there or not there that are going to affect us later in life, whether we believe it or not. And in bringing on these men that we're going to bring in this first series, I want everyone to pay attention. If you're watching consistently on lunch break, pay attention to how much what happens in your youth, the influences you have, how it affects your whole life.
Your whole life. You know, what's important to me is that everybody's got a story. Everyone out there has a story, and stories are important. You know, as we're in church, we're reading other people's stories. Old Testament, the apostles. We're reading somebody else's story. And the scripture tells us that those stories are there to help us.
Yes.
You know, so as we all have stories, we're going to bring you guys some stories. So J2, tell me this. Tell me, who are the influences in your life?
Biggest influences in my
good and bad.
This is where I have to be honest. Sports figures. Yeah. I was allowed to idolize them, and like I base my life off of my favorite sports figure. So I would say that personal person that poured into me, I didn't have it. And then the bad influences were I had these two friends. I'm not going to mention them by name.
We can't.
Not going to name them. Not going to throw you. But you know, if you're watching, and we've already had this talk. But
that's funny too, because you do have that talk.
Yes, we've had the talk. But they introduced me to. One introduced me to alcohol, and then that sent my life through a spiral. And I wanted to be like that dude. Like, he was cool. He had all the women. He was what I idolized, and very much influenced me. He was a fighter. Got me into my fighting. Got me into all that. And then another person who introduced me to marijuana and introduced me just to a lifestyle of just being. The biggest thing I could put when I was smoking weed all the time was I was content with just smoking, and that was the worst place. It was one of the toughest places you can be, but I had those friendships, and if they were doing that with me, I was good. So those were those influences that really affected me. And then, of course, I will say in adulthood, those were my childhood, teenage experiences. In adulthood, I got introduced to my friend. I would mention him, Jeff, who used to party with us, and the craziest thing, he'd be out there partying with us, but he would stay sober, and I will always say, I would ask him, how are you still having fun and you're sober? It drove me nuts. And he would say, I'm high on life. God is good. And he would always just invite me to church. So that's what got me in. He was a huge influence. And then, of course, ran into you, ran into Brad Lawson, ran into Tom Hollenbeck, Shane, Pastor Ron. They all brought me in. Al Martinez got me running. There's just, once I got into a church, that changes your life. And
it does. It does.
That's what I like about this, because we can talk. We're going to be talking about our lives, but it's going to always get back to Jesus in the church somehow, because it is our life.
Well, it's our ethos, as Pastor Josh says. It's our philosophy of life. That's how it goes. So I loved our first meeting. Remember what it was about?
The dancing with the kids.
No.
Like the one before?
Yes. The Packers.
Yes, I forgot.
We're both Packer fans.
Big time.
And
it was a shocker. Yes.
It's what we had in a relationship. We had this conversation in the junior high room.
I forgot about that.
And we talked about being Packer fans, but it led to another encounter we had that we'll probably talk about later on or at another show.
Yes, it was. We that's where we meshed on being huge Packer fans, and he has a great collection, by the way, if anyone ever knew.
Well, it's funny because I got to meet my idol, Bart Starr. You know, he was my quarterback. And it was funny because when I got to meet him, I had the privilege of meeting him, take some pictures with him. And he asked me, how does a kid from California become a Green Bay Packer fan? I go, that was simple. There again, my dad, I don't want to downplay my dad's role in my life, but I remember when I was 7 years old, and it was Super Bowl, and it was in 1966. That's how old I am, if you can do the math. And he put me on his lap because we were watching the Super Bowl. My dad's from Texas, so he was a Dallas Cowboys fan. For the week before, the Dallas Cowboys beat the Packers beat the Dallas Cowboys in the NFC Championship. Yeah. So he was mad at the Packers, so he set me on his lap. And he says, today you're a Packers fan. It was a black and white TV, and I think they were in the darker uniforms that day. And he goes, I'm going to be a Kansas City Chief fan. Well, the Packers beat the Kansas City Chiefs. So I thought, I'm a Packer fan. Yay, we won. I didn't really familiar with football. So the next year, the Packers beat the Cowboys in the Ice Bowl in the NFC Championship. So he set me back on his lap watching Super Bowl, 1967. He says, you're a Packer fan, and I'm a Oakland Raider fan, because that's who they're playing. Packers won again. My dad tells me twice I'm a Packer fan. I'm a Packer fan for life. There was no, there was, and I told Bart Starr that story.
And my story was similar in a different way. I should have known I was going to be a rebel because my dad was and still is to this day. My dad, Eugene Greer, is one of the biggest Dallas Cowboy fans you'll ever meet.
No, our dads are
Torture.
both.
Yes.
No,
I feel sorry for them. They never win, but but he was the Packers. I only knew Cowboys were an amazing team. My dad, I have an old picture of me wearing a full Dallas Cowboy suit.
No.
I was never a Dallas Cowboy fan. I guess maybe because I was that young, but I saw the Packers beat the Dallas Cowboys, and then in that same season they won the Super Bowl against the Patriots. I'm like, wait a minute, Dallas Cowboys aren't the best team; it's the Packers. And I gave my loyalty from that day forward, and I've been a Packer fan ever since. Crazy.
I love that story. So Justin.
Yep.
Yes, a couple of days ago we talked about something that no one knows about us. Tell me something different that no one knows about you than the fact that you played the trombone.
So for one, I played the trombone. That was a crazy one.
We got this conversation. I played the violin all through, and we were kind of amazed with each other because I loved playing the violin, and then in the orchestra I played the violin, and we were both in the Bakersfield City orchestra.
I traveled playing the trombone with a little. I was the guy with the little rusty trombone in the crew with all these people who've been playing music their whole lives, and I just picked it up and was natural. And like I just remember when the school selected me, I'm like, what is going on? It was a weird season in life, so that was weird. I could get down on trombone. I'm sure I can't now, but I would love. It's actually something I would love to relearn.
Oh, I'd love to.
Don't. If you have a talent, keep going with that thing, man.
That's important. I wish I would have never stopped playing the violin. I still have the violin in my closet that I had.
Pick it up.
I never forget my mom. I told her we got to go. I brought home a violin. She goes, "What's that?" I go, "Violin." She goes, "What are you doing with it?" I go, "I'm learning how to play it." She goes, "Why the violin?" I go, "It was the only instrument that was left. No one picked up, so I wanted to be in the orchestra, so I had to pick the violin."
But the biggest thing, I'm a comedy fanatic to a different level. Like it sounds like a weird thing to say to something people don't know, but they don't get it. Like stand-up comics, I know them all. Like I know sports stars, I know their history, I know their past, I know why they became comedians. I fall asleep listening to stand-up comedy.
Really?
And
that's
it's
pretty
just,
cool.
That laughter is good medicine. Is like I live by it. Like my wife is my testimony. I fall asleep. I will be laying next to her in the morning, and you still hear a comedian and like laughter going off, and she's like, "Turn that down! Like, what are you? Like, what's wrong with you?" And it's just I would rather go to sleep laughing.
So you go to sleep listening to comedy music, and I go to sleep listening to worship music.
Yes,
so
yes.
I'm just trying to get that difference out there.
It's a full difference. And that's what happened. I will try to make a joke in very serious situations a lot of times, but it's how I learned to deal with some things in life, and like I've found a healthy balance in it. I love laughter. I think people need to do it more often.
Well, I think it gives you a healthy perspective.
Yes.
I know the other day as you and I were laughing, I left here kind of just feeling refreshed.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I just thought, hey, it was just Justin and I shared a moment. That's why I think it's so important for people to have relationships with other people. And I love having multiple relationships with different people. So
yeah,
I do.
So Pastor Tom, what is yours? What we know, and I want to get into his past a little bit while we still have time. But
well, so I'm just going to tell you, you might pull mine out just through conversation.
I really might. So what is something, because we know a lot about you. What is something we don't know about Tom, Pastor Tom, Mr. California Tom? There's a lot of Toms in this businessman Tom. That's why in my opinion, we're going out as ourselves as the first guest, but Tom is my first guest because for one, I look up to you and I idolize you because you've done it in the world. You've been very successful in the world and in the church world.
Thank you.
And you've been able to navigate both. And to what the things that you've like turned aside and chose Jesus Christ, you had to have had some stories back then, though. And I know there's some there. We're here waiting. So what are some things? There were two questions before you go. What is something we don't know? And what is one of the, without glorifying it, what's one of the coolest stories from your past when you were a big dude, Mr. California? A cool story that you can tell us.
Well, I'd like to maybe start there because my past goes into bodybuilding. And I fell into the sport. I fell into the sport by being discouraged because I was a wrestler in high school. had a very good career in wrestling. But my junior year was my breakout year. But in my senior year, I got hurt, fractured my hip, and all my dreams fell apart for wrestling. And so after graduation, I tell people that I had an opportunity because let me go here and I won't get too far off. I got inducted into Sal High's Hall of Fame in 2019. That was really a weird environment. I shared this on several occasions, and it was really a weird thing for me because I thought, yay, yay me, my high school is going to recognize me. But I remember I had to tell people and thank people about being nominated and entered in the Hall of Fame at Sal High. And I said it was a weird thing. And as I went there, I started thinking about how did I get here? Because when I was in high school, I mean, I wasn't a good kid, and I realized that there was other people that helped me along. And then I started realizing a pretty unique thing about each one of those guys, that every one of them was already in Sal High's Hall of Fame. So I told the people that was there, the reason I may have been into the Sal High's Hall of Fame is because these other guys were in the Hall of Fame. Every one of them, Don Murphin, who was the principal of Sal High, Don Lathrop, Robert Lathrop, who was a wrestling coach, Joe C. was a wrestling coach, Mike Stricker, Eugene Walker, which I got inducted with. They were all coaches, and Steve Strauss, and they saw a kid without direction. That was me. They saw a kid without direction, without a father figure in his life giving him direction, and they knew my personality just being around kids, and they took an interest in me. They took an interest in me and helped guide my life. It was funny when I would ditch out of practice. Coach Lathrop would have the team run by my house and get me out of the house because he knew I was just not coming to practice. It was so cool because he went out of his way to come get me and not let me get into these bad habits. So that was it. And so as I graduated high school, my dad was telling me, he goes, Tom, he goes, either you move out or you stay here and you pay me rent. And I thought that was, I knew that was coming. And so as I decided, well, what if I moved towns? Would that deal still be on? So my dad kind of set me up in L.A. for 6 months. And I was down there with not a lot of direction. I knew I had an interest in things. And I ran into a guy who took me to a gym, and it was Gold's Gym in Venice. And so I kind of fell into that, So I tell people that was a big deal. But my brightest moment, as I reflect backwards, I won a lot of titles, got to travel the United States, other countries, and made a lot of money doing it and competing. And I got to ride the 80s fitness craze, which was amazing. I mean, the fitness craze was happening. Pumping Iron, when I walked into Gold's Gym, they were actually filming Pumping Iron. And so I walked into Gold's Gym in 1976. And they were filming Pumping Iron. I had no idea who Arnold or the guys were. I just understand they were big freaks, and I liked working out. I was always an athlete, so I folded in with the community. And so as I folded in with the community, Pumping Iron didn't get really famous until 1978. So I spent that early years in Gold's Gym, and we were kind of a cult. It was really weird. We were kind of a cult. We were these big freaks, and people were like, they just gave us leeway, and it was the gyms wasn't what you know today.
Yeah.
I mean, the guys that were working out back then really didn't want the normal person with us because we had this culture, and the normal person didn't really want to be around us either, So riding the fitness craze, got to see the merger of this fitness industry with the normal people. But I had a couple cool things, and I didn't know who Arnold Schwarzenegger was at the time, like this big bodybuilder. But I remember a encounter with him when I was doing low rows one day, and he put his knee in my back, and I went back like that, and that was Arnold. Yes. And he told me I was just doing it all wrong. I go, what? He goes, you showed up tomorrow at 6 a.m. I showed you how to do it correctly.
So you personally would.
Yeah. Yeah.
See, that's what's crazy. He talks about it like it's not.
Well,
the Terminator.
But he wasn't even
talking to the Terminator.
He wasn't even the famous bodybuilder he was, and he wasn't the governor, or he was the governor.
That's who he was.
But he did. But probably one of the highlights of my career was, and I've won bigger contests than the Cal, but when I won the Mr. California, I had something happen. I'll never forget it. I was really tired. Bodybuilding was different back in the 80s, and I won the Mr. California in 85. And a kid came up with a weight belt. It's the first autograph I ever gave. And
Okay.
he came up and he goes, would you sign this? And I'm sitting there going, absolutely. But what is my signature? You know,
Uh-huh.
I really thought that. I mean, it was quite an honor. I had signed hundreds after that, but that was my first. And it was really impacting to me because I told him, I go, this is my first autograph. And I gave it to the kid, and I don't know if he still got the weight belt. I've lost track of it.
Mhm.
But that was like kind of like the coolest moment. And I've did a lot of other things I did, but yeah.
Okay.
I was a host of an ESPN Muscle Magazine.
Yeah, I saw a
I-
video recently on Facebook of you like going through a supermarket.
Yeah, that was it.
Is that the one?
Yeah,
Oh, that's
yeah,
amazing.
yeah, yeah.
That
It was
thing's
it was
so
it was
cool.
a show called American Muscle Magazine,
Okay.
and it was the guy that was doing it was named a guy named Lou Zwick, and it aired on ESPN, and I was one of the
That's so cool.
first hosts on American Muscle Magazine, and it was that. Back then, there weren't a whole lot of health food stores. It was called the Bread of Life. It was up in San Jose.
Got you.
And I'll remember it was my manager sold me on it. I was one of the first bodybuilders to have an actual manager, and they said it was going to be an easy gig, and we'll fly you up to San Jose. We'll give you a script, and you know, and they told me they'd give me a script ahead of time, which they happened to give it to me on the plane ride up to San Jose. So I had to memorize a script in between shoots.
Mm.
So we had all this film equipment. It's not like this set here is back. You had all this film equipment. You had these big cables running across, and there was this little old lady. I'll never forget this. Every scene we went to, she was there, and she would push her cart and she'd hit the big cables and go right through the set.
Oh no.
And it was funny that I would sit there and I would be doing. I remember I was doing a segment for this on a chicken, and I picked up this piece of chicken. I looked down and I saw her coming, so I just stopped. And they go, "What's wrong?" I go, "She's coming through the set."
Here she comes again.
Well, you know, you got to remember, I'm this big roid raging guy.
Yes.
I'm about 250, and I'm like wanting to get angry, going, "Is there anywhere else you could go besides through our set?" And so I would memorize the script between each set. Now, this is something a lot of people don't know about me is I've got a speech impediment.
Okay.
And I've had it ever since they came in and tested me in second grade. And I have a real heart for people that because I got put in special classes,
Mhm.
and a lot of my friends used to make fun of me because of that. I still have my speech impediment to this day. I mean, through bodybuilding and my speaking and hosting things, I worked on it. I took speech lessons all my life, but it still bothers me to this day. Pastor Ron knew it bothered me when he wanted to put me in the pulpit.
Yeah.
I'm like terrified. You know, I could stand in front of ESPN cameras with 10,000 people as an audience in nothing but a brief, bikini brief.
Mm.
But if I had to say 2 words in the microphone, that just scared the daylights out of me.
Wow. And then to be what you do for a living is crazy. It shows what God can do. And there's one more story I want, because this is a story that I know that I want it able to be shared. There's one of your Bible studies, like I forget how the story goes, but it was one of your first ones, and it was when you were first becoming saved, and you brought all these bodybuilders to your Bible study.
Oh. Well, that's not how it started. You know, I really felt God was moving in my life,
Mm-hmm.
and I wanted God to use me. You know, and because you know I have to say this for a lot of guys out there. You know, when I was successful in bodybuilding and I was successful in my corporate career, I was screwed up,
Yeah.
and I knew I was screwed up. And I always share this with people. I just didn't know how to get unscrewed up. I just didn't know how.
Mm-hmm.
This book here, Conspiracy of Silence, it's the first book Pastor Ron wrote, was an inspiration to my life because the whole theory behind Conspiracy of Silence, which is available on our VBF website, is that God's voice is always moving in people's lives. But there's a world philosophy that if you can keep God's voice silent in people's lives, they may not become everything God wants them to be.
Exactly.
And that changed my life. After I read that book, realizing God wants to speak into my life, He wants to change my life. And that was the thing that let me know that I could get unscrewed up. But if I had God's help, I could get unscrewed. And I did, unscrewed up, and I did. I'm still dealing with stuff today. But it was the thing that was missing. Tom tried to cram stuff in my life. So the idea was I wanted to be used by God. And so Doug Lohman kind of tricked me. He said, "Why don't you start a Bible study?" And I said, "Sure." Doug's our pastor in Vegas. And so I read all the books on how to start a home group, small group. And I'm telling you, if you want to start a home group or small group, talk to me because I know how not to do it. And I do know how to do it. So what I did was I baked cookies because I heard, hey, you got to bake some cookies, had some refreshments. I advertised in the church bulletin, did everything, and nobody showed up.
Mm.
You know, Doug called me the next day and said, how'd it go? I go, it was great. I was all ready. I was studied up. And I cooked the cookies and I did all the stuff to they tell you to do, and no one showed up. He goes, I'll just try it another week. So I did it on Thursday night, 7 o'clock, and did the same routine, and no one showed up. You know, it wasn't. I'm not saying I was defeated, but I was starting to realize maybe this is not working. Maybe God's not using me in the area He wants to use me in. So then I did it one more week. Ron goes, give it one more week. So I did it one more week, and no one showed up again. 3 weeks, nobody showed up. Now I'm feeling pretty depressed, and I'm feeling, I'm kind of like confidence, because this is brand new for me.
Yeah.
I know how to go and be athletic. I know how to go in the corporate world and work, but this was all new to me. So Pastor Ron asked me, he goes, Tom, told me, maybe you're fishing in the wrong pond. Where's your area of influence? And for me, it's in the gym. I go, but I don't want those knuckleheads at my house. I'm moving away from those guys. And you have to be careful about how you think about that, because sometimes you have the most influence of where you've been.
Yeah.
Because they know who you are. The guys knew I was a knucklehead. They knew I was a steroid addict. They knew I was a roid rager. They knew I was an angry man. So I never forget, and it's so crazy how God sometimes confirms these things. I went in the gym, and I had a guy come up to me who goes to our church now, Steve Hummeke. And Steve Hummeke goes, so I heard you're doing something at your house. And I go, I am. And now Steve will tell you I never invited him. I never told him what it was, but somebody else goes, what are you doing? I go, I'm doing a Bible study. He goes, I'll come. Steve tells me I never invited him, but he came anyways.
Yeah, exactly.
and so so pretty soon, as this Bible study started at my house with a bunch of gym rats, it grew to a point that it got pretty scary. I mean, my wife Tiffany would say that, hey, sometimes you would have too many guys in our house. I mean, honestly, I had a 2-story house and guys were all over. I think at one time we had probably 60, 70 guys in my house. And we were just all from the world. I had one guy, never knew. His name was Larry Hoff. Larry Hoff, we're friends on Facebook. Larry Hoff came to my house and he goes, would you like me to play a worship song? I go, you know how to play a worship song? And he goes, yeah. So he learned a song. So we always sang one song at my house. And I had people coming in, and it was such an amazing experience. And I did this probably for 2 years. And the night before my wife was expected to give birth to our daughter, Taylor, she came to me. She goes, Tom, you can't keep doing this. I go, doing what? She goes, you can't have this Bible study after we have a brand new baby in the house. Oh. I was like, what? I can't? And so I told the guys that night, I go, hey, you guys have to find someplace else to go. My wife doesn't want you at my house on Thursday night when I got a brand new baby. So Steve Hummeke took it to his house.
Interesting.
So that was my first experience.
That is
that I had.
I've had a similar experience, you guys.
What was that?
I'll share right now. I want to remind with you guys watching, use the world that you're in, man.
Oh,
It is your best.
You have an influence. And you just got to realize it may
not
not
be more influence in the world.
It might not be where you want to be. It's where you're at.
And mine was basketball.
Oh, that's good.
I've been a basketball player my whole life.
It's not where you want to be. It's where you're at.
It's where and for me, basketball is where I'm at home. I still play in adult leagues to this day, and
I didn't know that.
Yes, I will not stop basketball. I plan on playing until I'm 75, and my knees will not let me do it. That's the only thing that will ever stop me. But my most successful Bible study, still to this day, I'm still doing multiple other ones. There's never been one more successful than the hoop Bible study I had on Monday nights at VBS.
Oh, I remember.
Oh my!
That was a scary group.
It was very scary.
I remember. I didn't know it was yours.
Yes.
Look what I'm learning about you.
I ended up taking it over, and it was amazing. And the guys, the testimonies, I've seen more transformation in that than in my average Bible studies, because you're taking guys who knew nothing.
It was a scary group.
It was a scary
Did you have
group.
some
Fights happened.
Didn't you? I said you had fist fights out there.
We had fist fights, and you guys don't know the struggle I had to have to keep that thing going. I'm like, it's gonna get shut down this week, and I'm like, nope, guys, we gotta keep our heads. And so many guys grew through that Bible study, and like I still have connections through that Bible study to this day. People, it's amazing what using your own world can do for you. So I've been trying to do that. I even took that into the youth with me, like in doing the Bible studies through video games and things like that. Use the world that you love, that you're in, and
bloom where you're planted.
Right now I'm working on golf, you guys. Golf is what I'm turning into, is what I'm kind of switching from my retirement game. So if any golfers out there, hit me up so we can start like a little golf Bible study. That's my next move I want to do as we start opening this world back up.
Justin, what was the most impactful spiritual moment that you had?
Oh, man.
I can tell you what mine was.
Hit me with yours.
I'll never forget it, because going to church wasn't something that was natural for me. And I do believe the Holy Spirit invaded my life. Because one night I was living with my friend John Haddad. They own the car dealerships here in town. John and I were living together. I was back in Bakersfield, and John and I were living together. I was having a house built. And so, as we were sitting there on a Saturday night, and we usually go out to Goose Looney's or something, kind of get crazy, we started having a conversation what we were going to do. And I said, I think I want to stay home because I want to go to church tomorrow. My friend John, I'll never forget it, and John can verify it if you know John. He goes, you want to go to church? And I go, yeah. He goes, if you go to church, I'm going to go to church. And so I didn't know how to go to church. I really had no idea how to go to church. I was like, because I wasn't brought up in that environment. So I told him, and John goes, well, Tom, we can just go to church. I go, no, we can't, because those are good people. We're not good people. They don't want to let us in those places because we're not good people. And he goes, well, I think we go. So we had a friend that we knew. And so we called her and asked, well, how do we go to church? And her question was, you and John are going to go to church? And I go, yeah, we're going to go to church. How do you go to church? She goes, you can just walk in. I was like, well, they're good people. We're bad people. Don't you have to meet with somebody and then check you off or something to get in? She goes, no. So I remember we started going, and I thought this was the most amazing experience. Then I remember walking into Valley Bible Fellowship. Mm-hmm. And I was sitting there, and when Pastor Ron said that, if you want to change your life, raise your hand. I go, that's me. I want to change my life. Now, I was kind of intimidated because I had my buddy John sitting next to me, so I didn't.
Yes.
So the next week, I'm like, I'm going to raise my hand. I just want to get to the hand raising part. And I got there, and I was like, I didn't because my buddy John was with me. So the next week, John called me and goes, hey, I can't make it today. Go by yourself. And I'm like, right on. Today's the day. Perfect. I remember I sat through the service just going, get to the hand raising part. I want to accept Christ. And so Pastor Ron got to the point where he goes, if you want to accept Christ, raise your hand. Man, my hand shot up and shot back down. And then about 3 months later, Pastor Ron goes, you know what, today, that's not good enough. If you really make that commitment, I want you to get out of your seat and come forward. And I was like, Tommy's not getting out of his seat and coming forward.
Didn't sign up for that.
I raised up the hand, and you said God saw it, and that's all it is. But I really felt this kind of small voice, which I believe is God's voice, Amen, in my body, in my mind, and it says, if you really meant it, do it. So I got up, and I noticed that the other people that raised their hand, they were sitting down. I was like walking by Mad Dog and a dude going, get up, come down with me. I was like, if I'm coming down, you should too. But I came down there. Doug Lohman saw me, and Doug played for the Phillies, and we knew each other through athletics. And Doug's like, hey, Tom. I go, hey, Doug. We knew each other. He went to BHS. I went to Sahai. And he said, you just accepted Christ? I go, I did. He goes, man, that's great. He goes, why don't we have tea this week? And Doug Lohman had tea with me for a year after that. Every Thursday at Carol's, we had iced tea. I think it was 3 o'clock. Yeah. It was transformation. Sometimes those moments, you got to grab a hold of them. Mm-hmm. I always think, what if I didn't raise my hand? I think God has a plan, but sometimes you just have to step through those moments. And I went down there and met Doug, and Doug was my mentor for a whole year over iced tea.
Okay, so mine is, we had different experiences, and I think we're close on time. We'll probably end on these.
Oh, you can't back out on me now, dude.
I'm going to share it because my experience in walking through VBF's doors, I had a friend Jeff, who had been telling me to come to church, and I asked my other friend, Daniel, I go, hey, Daniel, this dude keeps telling me to go to church. I ain't trying to go to church. And Daniel goes, did you know there's a lot of pretty girls at this church? Like, it was
that was the hook. That was the hook.
I was like, Jeff, let's go to church, bro. And so I went to church, and I'm sitting there. I'll never forget Pastor Rod. I hope you see this, because you get on stage, you do this little dance. You said, you're at the club doing this, and you think you're hot stuff, don't you?
He does dance pretty good.
Yeah.
He's got some moves.
And he did that, and I'm literally I saw myself so much in it. I saw myself, and I go, ugh. And I went home. I couldn't raise my hand. I was similar to you. I couldn't raise my hand. But I got home that night, and I was like, I was supposed to raise my hand.
Oh, I knew that when I came home from
church. So I went into the restroom. I raised my hand. I literally raised my hand in a mirror in the restroom, said the prayer, and went out crying to my mom and called my nephew crying. I just called everyone crying, and I had never showed any emotion to anyone in my life before. I had never shown an ounce of emotion. And so it all just came out, and I'm crying. But the biggest moment was this. Even after that, I had a long walk. I still was going to the club. I was struggling. Like, I could not figure out how to walk with Christ.
It takes some time.
I could not figure it out.
You got to be patient with yourself, because God's transformation power sometimes takes time to work out in our life.
And that's my story. He was working with me, and I would ride with Jeff every week, or I would meet him every week. And the week came, and this is when I learned that Jesus had already started transforming me. I still thought I was the same filthy person. But Jeff goes, I'm not going to church this week. I'm doing something. Like, he was doing something. And it was a Wednesday night. And I was just sitting, and I'm like, what am I going to do then? And I went, well, I can drive to church. And I got up and I drove to church. I was wearing a Brett Favre jersey. I
No
remember
way.
Sitting in the back, I'm by myself, and I'm like, I'm a Christian. Like, I'm here by myself, not because my friend, not because the girls. And I remember sitting by myself like it was me, the only one in the audience. Like, I love Jesus. I can't believe this is a real thing. I was tripping.
Aren't
It was
those
crazy.
moments
It
amazing?
was weird.
One of those moments for me, I was with my buddy John Haddad. We were driving back from a Wednesday night service, and it was St. Patrick's Day, and we were coming down 24th Street after we got off the freeway, 178, and we were passing Chester, and I looked at him and I said, isn't it so cool that we're coming home from church and we're not over at Goose Looney's? You know, it was great because that's where we usually be. And I said, you know what? We are saved. We had the same experience.
Yes.
Just,
when you realize
there was a
you're
couple more
saved.
things going on in our lives, but it was such a real experience.
You realize that you've now put Jesus as priority, which
Yes.
he never been before, and
No.
you can't do that. Only Jesus
No,
Christ
no.
can come into your heart and do that. I think we have a lot more stories to
and
tell.
you never got my secret, and I think
Oh!
I'll waive it for no, it's too long.
But yeah, no, that's going into what I'm going to explain. These stories are going to come out in every
Yes.
interview. I know we'll be able to connect with every person
Yeah.
that comes on the show. If you're watching on Facebook and you
Yes.
have a story, reach out to us. We can talk to you. And
yeah. If you got a question too, send it in. My email is pastortom@vbf.org.
I'm Jay Greer at vbf.org.
Yeah, you have
can
a
catch me
question
on
about
all social
today,
media.
hit me up on Facebook. We're hoping to create a culture and a community with some of our connections.
Or people aren't afraid to share their story. You got to be able to share.
Yeah, and two, if you like what we had today, share it on your Facebook page or your Instagram or something like that. I'm not too proud to ask for that.
Yeah, for sure. Yes. Share, like, let your friends know, and tune in. We thank you guys. We'll be back next week.
Yep. Thank you guys.